Now, training can come from a lot of different ways. Obviously, when we talk about a coffee house training, that you need to have people automatically go to espresso training, which is absolutely key and vital. You have to, be aware of what you're doing. You have to invest in yourself. You have to invest in your staff. But further than that, along with your training, waste has to be a big part of what you look at. A lot of people don't realize how much a drink costs them. That's probably the #1 thing that I look at when I work with other business owners. They just don't realize what their costs are in any way, shape, or form. And they try and cut costs in other areas instead of build their costs appropriately. So a perfect example is for all of our recipes, we have an exact milk amount that we use. This is for every size and for every drink in our current stores. So if we look at a macchiato, a traditional macchiato, for instance, has a shot of espresso typically, and typically about an ounce of wet foam, if you will. So a lot of business owners that I talk to, when they build their costs for macchiato, use an ounce of milk and an ounce of espresso. The problem with that is you cannot steam 1 ounce of milk. It's not possible. So if you're using the correct size pitcher, for our staff, the least amount we feel they can steam appropriately is 4 ounces of milk. So the cost for my macchiato is a shot of espresso and 4 ounces of milk. So that's one thing that you want to make sure you're doing, is what does it actually cost you to build the drinks that you're doing? And then secondly, does your staff reflect that? How much coffee do you use to pull a shot of espresso? We use anywhere from kind of 18 to 22 grams for a double shot. We build our cost off of 14 grams for a single. Reason being, we pull all doubles at our stores. We want our staff tasting their espresso on a regular basis. We want them dialing in. We only want them serving shots that they know are good. So we build a high waste percentage into our espresso, much higher percentage-wise than any of our other products that we use. We use about 30% waste, which sounds like a lot, but for us, it's a cost that then ensures we're serving an appropriate product, and I'm not surprised at my cost at the end of the week or the month or the year, whatever you might be looking at. So when you train, you want to make sure, one, that your staff is very clear of the expectations that you've laid out with them. My staff knows they cannot steam 12 ounces of milk, for instance, to make a macchiato. And when they begin training, they actually measure all of their milk for every single drink. And they do that until we feel that they can eyeball it appropriately. And we've got lots of testing in place to ensure that they kind of hit those marks. So those are a few of the things that we do from a training perspective to really make sure that all of our money and all of our products is kind of accounted for as much as possible. Really small things you can do to kind of grade in on the controls. The other thing from a training perspective that I'm really big on, that I think a lot of people miss the mark on, is new hires. The average age, obviously, for a coffee house is a younger type of staff. I feel that 18-year-olds, I don't want to say they get dumber every year, but they come out of high school less prepared for the workforce, I will say. I definitely feel that. And I think it is an unreasonable expectation for a business owner to hire an 18-year-old and 19-year-old to put them on the register their first day and have them represent their brand appropriately. I think that's one of the most missed marks business owners have. We have 40 hours of training for our staff before they ever hit one of the stores of our floor, one of the floors of our store. And that training is 0 drinks. They're with us for months before they get to any sort of espresso training or any sort of milk training. But just to get behind the register and talk to a customer, there is 40 hours of training so that they know exactly what I want them representing when they're talking to those customers. They're not going to learn all the right answers in those 40 hours, but they're going to know how to answer every question appropriately. Whether it be, how does direct trade differ from fair trade? Whether it comes to, at any given time, we have 40 different coffees in the store. They're not going to know all the details about 40 different coffees, but they are going to know how to talk to customers about what they do know, how to take the information that we have for them at the store and then relate that to a customer. They're going to know what Klatch stands for, what our priorities are, what they should be doing at any given moment. So I think that's one of the most missed marks that new businesses, or even old businesses, have, is they hire people and put them on the floor and expect them to represent their brand properly, and it's just an unrealistic expectation. You need to invest in your staff in every single step, not just the drink training, which we all think about, but also your brand training as well. And if you don't know what you would train on for your brand, simple thing to start with. You know what I mean? What do you want your staff to know? If your customers to walk away, what would they be saying about your store? It's not necessarily just great coffee. It might be, wow, they knew so much. You know what I mean? Whatever the detail is, what do you want them saying? And then is your staff representing them? And if not, how do you give them the tools to represent them? simple things like a handbook, simple things like lots of tasting. We do tons of role playing in that 40 hours. It's a lot of role playing. How do you deal with the line of customers? When do you brew the coffee versus when do you talk to the customer? When is it appropriate to let the line build? You know, if you're like our stores, your staff does a ton of multitasking. People don't know how to multitask. They don't know how to organize what they're doing. So do they have a list of priorities that they know to go off of to say, when I have 10 things to do, I always know the right one to pick to do first. So simple things like that I think really go a long way towards creating a better experience for your customers, getting your customers through your line quicker, and getting them to return at the end of the day as well. So those are some simple back of the house things that I really like to hit on that I think a lot of people miss. So now Todd will talk a little bit about some front of the house things.
Okay. So Heather did definitely point out a few things that we can kind of pull back on, costs on, looking at ways and things like that. But the other end, in the front of house, we really want to look at how can we drive sales. Average ticket is an easy way to increase sales in a store. It's much easier to drive that average ticket just a little bit higher than it is to get more customers coming into that store, right? So first and foremost thing I like to talk about is how do you walk into the store when you first show up? What do you do? What do you see? What do you look at? So when you're first opening your doors, what's the first thing you see when you walk inside your cafe? Are you, so a great example is, we have a cafe we work with in San Diego, and they, you know, their cafe owner said, we don't sell whole beans. Our customers don't buy it. We've tried it. It doesn't work. We went in there, we set up a stand, so the very first thing they saw was open that door, first thing they see is retail whole bean, right in front of them before anything else. Immediately, the following week, they sold 10 bags of retail whole beans. And for the next month, they were averaging 10 to 12 bags every single week. Now, just the simplest thing of putting it right in front of the customer and how easy that is to add sales. It's such an easy thing to add sales. You just send it out and it goes. But again, it comes back to the training. Your employees need to be able to talk and have conversations about the company. They need to be able to have a level of understanding to have that conversation when somebody does ask a question. And think about the flow your customers go through from the moment they enter your shop until they leave. What do they pass? Do you have retail? Retail is a great way to drive sales. Having things available for your customers. Whether there is just simple things like a couple of B60s with some filters, you know, a couple of mugs that brand you. I think that's a huge opportunity, is having mugs, thermoses, you know, any of those things that brand your shop. It's a great way. People will buy them, they'll take them, and when they're home or when they're out and using those, they think of that great experience they had in your shop, and it reminds them to come back. So these simple things that they are passed along the way. Then the next thing I want to say is food. You know, I visit a ton of cafes all over, really all over the country. And when I go into cafes, it really bums me out when I walk in at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon and I get a cup of coffee and I want a little snack to go with it, and they have practically nothing to eat. You know, and I think that's a great opportunity to continue to drive sales. How can you do food better in stores? How can you look at, you know, a lot of cafes have great morning pastries, and a lot of things to drive sales through 11 a.m. I'm starting to see a little bit more and more sandwiches coming into cafes, paninis and things like that, which is great for the lunch crowd. We want to continue to think about that. Is if you're open until 9 o'clock at night, how do you keep sales driving until 9 o'clock at night with food? And looking at different dessert pastries, things that pair well with your coffee. And some of the great things I've seen in cafes is when they actually list that. Here's our brew bar, here's 3 coffees on our brew bar, and hey, here's the 3 pastries that go with each of those coffees. We have this pastry, pairs well with this. This pastry pairs well with that. This pastry pairs well with that. You know, simple things like that that can kind of help you boost sales. And even doing promotions around that of saying, you know, our brew bar is $5, our pastry is $3, so it's $8. But you know what, you get them together, $7. Doing a little combination, that just drives that average ticket that much more. You know, and I think it goes right back into training too, is that customer service piece of getting people to come back. How they're greeted, how the interaction is, what is happening there, gets your customers to feel welcome and involved in your cafe. And that will get them to want to come back to you and want to be a repeat customer. So getting them coming back and driving that average ticket. Huge ways to continue to drive these sales.
Yeah, one of the great promotions that Todd, I think you at Starbucks did this one time, is in order to sell their tumblers, I think it was a tumbler and a $20 gift certificate for $20. And what it got people to do was buy the tumbler and then come back to use that gift certificate. So not only you aren't creating the sale for the one time, but you're creating that repeat business as well, which is really key also.
It was actually Cova.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Cova in Portland, and that was last year during Portland's SCAA. I went there and got a tumbler, and I walked down the store and I opened it up and there was a gift card inside of it. And it just reminded me to come back. Like the tumbler basically was free, but every time I use that tumbler all the time, and it always reminds me of my experience there. And if I ever go back to Portland, you know, that's where I'm going to go, and that's what you want to look for people in your city. You know, having that kind of experience.
Any questions?
Creative ideas as far as been in a lot of social media classes this morning, and basically within your small area of like one of your shops. I know I've been in your store, you can pull me there.
Yeah.
Just getting word out into the community to bring in more people that may not know the shops. From media.
You know, honestly, one of the biggest things for us is just word of mouth. You know, it's a very simple thing, but at the end of the day, if you have a great experience, it's where people are going to come want to hang out. You know, our stores the past 3 years have all seen a fairly substantial increase. The past 3 years, all 3 of our stores have all seen double-digit increases. And this year, one of them is up 23%. And a lot of it just comes down to that word of mouth piece. The other thing to be aware of also is, you know your hourly sales, know your busy times, and make sure you staff appropriately. You know, we kind of have a threshold that we look at for when we add a third person or a fourth person to a shift. And when you're looking at that, you're going to see that if you want to put that threshold a little bit lower than what you absolutely have to, because what you're going to find is by adding that person, you're automatically going to increase sales and easily cover them. Because what happens is people have a better experience. They don't wait as long. The employees have more time to talk to the customers. So you don't want to put yourself so thin on staffing that you create a bad experience for them. So, you know, kind of create some sort of, you know, we have an hourly amount or an hourly dollar amount that we kind of look at for what we want to see. 2 people can handle this many dollars. 3 people this many hours, so on and so forth. And we put that threshold when we add a person slightly lower than what it may cost us, because we know as soon as we hit that threshold and add that person, we're always going to see that increase. And I think that's one thing that people kind of miss sometimes as well.
You mentioned about cafes adding food. What are you finding is like 80-20 foods that are also easy to prepare for food safety?
I'll just start with, I'd say for breakfast, I mean, the things that, you know, you see selling a ton, at least in Southern California, you got your croissants, your bagels, bagels, you know, your Danishes are great sellers. You know, having a couple of muffins, you know, and looking at really also seasonal. I think that's one of the misses a lot of cafes have, is think about the foods that you enjoy. In the winter, people love chocolate. In the summertime, people love citrus. So if you have a chocolate chip scone in the winter, and then you switch it to a cranberry orange scone in the summer, you're continuing with that trend, and you're getting to have a food there available that your customers are looking for, wanting that flavor profile. And I think that's a great part of it also, is to kind of follow the flavor profile.
When you're talking about soups or sandwiches, when you talk about adding food?
Yeah, you can. I think it's just, I think it depends on your cafe. Adding soups and sandwiches needs to also match the branding, as we talked about, of what you want to convey to your customers, who you want to be. But I think that food is a great opportunity to continue to drive those sales and have things. We make sandwiches in our shops. We make them ourselves, and that helps us to be able to, you know, first in the morning they can make what they believe will make it through lunch. But if they run out, they can make more right then, right there. And that's a great part of it, instead of having another place that makes it and delivers it to you, because then when you sell out, you're out, and you have to say, I'm sorry.
You also have higher waste when you bring things in.
Awesome, yeah.
Yeah, when we opened, we did not carry any sort of lunch. And what we found was after 11 a.m., you have that huge drop in sales until about that 4 or 5 p.m. market. And what do you do to draw people in? And so food has really been helpful for us. Our cafes are 13 to 1,600 square feet. So they're not enormous. We do not have a kitchen at all. All of our lunch prep tables are right on the back counter, so it kind of goes register, and right behind that or around that area is kind of our lunch prep table, and then down further is our espresso bar. So they are somewhat right there, if you will. One thing that was important to us is when we added food, it had to match the quality of the coffee. So for instance, we bring in all Boar's Head meats. We slice them all. So, you know, we're not bringing in anything inferior. So if somebody was to come in, happen to be in the area, and try a salad, for instance, they're not going to say, oh, that salad sucks, I'm never going back there. They're going to say, wow, that salad was really good. They must have other things that are really good as well. So no matter what draws somebody in, the idea is that they always want to come back for another great experience. We used to do all made-to-order sandwiches, and we still do that. But one thing we added about 2 years ago was paninis. So we slice the meat in the morning, and we make them ahead of time and just store them in our deli or display refrigerated case. And as people order them, we just put them on the panini grill. So it takes about 4 minutes. It freed up our staff. They have an amazing price point on them just by calling them paninis. They would sell them for like $5.95, and they cost me like $1.50. They're fantastic. My made-to-order sandwiches kill me on time, they kill me on staffing, and they cost me a ton to make, and they have tons of produce, and produce sucks. So it just goes bad. It doesn't suck. But, you know, so I think, you know, if you can add, you know, panini grill is about $1,000, give or take, to add in. It requires 220 power, but it doesn't require hoods. They typically have a fairly small footprint to put in a cafe. You know, if you can do a small lunch prep fridge of some sort and source just some good quality meats and cheeses. Turkey pesto is our biggest seller. It's pesto, turkey, provolone cheese, and basil.
It's my favorite.
Yeah, and it does really well for us, you know, so there's really simple ways that you can add a substantial meal if you want, but even if you don't want to add as substantial as that, just make sure that your pastry offering can be also had in the afternoon, that it's not nothing but sweet muffins, for instance.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, one of the cafes that we worked with in LA actually when we first opened, at 10 a.m., they switched everything over in the pastry case to 100% sweet. So it's kind of like nothing, they have lunch, but it's like, it was either it's an airport, so you can imagine, a $12 sandwich or, you know, a $4 pecan bar. Those were essentially your options. So since then, we've added like veggie and hummus trays for $6. They do fantastic. So, you know, you don't have to do that, but have something light available. Croissants are good because they're good any time of day. I'm like a picky croissant person though, so make sure it's awesome. But, you know, I mean, have things that are just a little more, not quite as sweet.
So obviously in our industry, coming from a quality standpoint is number one, and a lot of the things you talk about, not allowing new hires to come behind bar and things of that nature to get them trained up. But a big thing that you're honing in on that I've noticed that there's been a lot of talk in the industry is making the experience as pleasant as possible in terms of friendliness and speed and everything else. That's awesome that you say bring someone else in to make sure that it's going quick, because a lot of shops will think don't bring them in, it's too much money for staffing, when it's hurting the experience because it's taking too long.
And I think you're right. There's a lot of cafes who won't bring them in for the money purpose, but I think, as Heather pointed out, it really does. By bringing them in, it improves that experience, and it may not pay off that first day it happens. And I think that's where cafe owners get scared. First day, first week, it's not paying off yet. It can take time, but that experience is improving. People are going to come back. I think one thing we didn't touch on and kind of made me think of was, you know, there's also the same thing with like opening times and closing times. It's this consistency of an experience that Sterling's kind of talking about here. That consistent experience is going to drive more people coming back. If you post that you open at 7 o'clock, and you're consistently opening at 7:05, 7:10, 7:15, your customers who are coming there are seeing you close, not open. They can't rely on you to be open. At 7:30, when they're thinking about where they're going to go for a cup of coffee, they're going to go somewhere else that they may not like as much, but they can rely on. So having the ability that if you say, I'm opening at 7, my personal recommendation is be open by 6:50. Have those doors open at 6:50. So your 7 a.m. customers can rely on you to be there, and it drives that consistency.
Yeah, if we add another shift, or if we bring another person in, we look for it to pay off in about 4 weeks. It's definitely not immediate because, again, that's where people, you know, you bring new people in, they bring an extra person in, so over time it builds up, but it should pay for itself in about 4 weeks. It may not definitely pay for itself that day, but it definitely can be a pretty quick thing.
Any other advantages in front of the house operation? I don't know, maybe like sampling or something like that for managing the line. I mean, if you're making awesome coffee, people will be willing to wait for it. But a lot of times, okay, you can do something to keep them engaged and run other things aside from maybe sampling.
Yeah, I mean, I think sampling is a great way to keep people engaged and also to get your product to be tasty, especially when it's something new, that they haven't tried before. Just getting them to try it, taste it. It's a great way to drive that average ticket and drive sales. I think engagement-wise, it's one of the things that drew me to Klatch and made me love Klatch for years before I came to work there was that every time I came there, I opened the door and I was greeted from all the way across the room every single time, 100% of the time, no matter what. That door opened, I was always greeted. And as a few of the employees got to know me, I was then greeted by name. And so, that in and of itself, right when you walk in, when you see a long line, if you've been greeted, especially if you've been greeted by name, you're not going to turn around and walk out. You just lowered your balk rate right there. And you really want to watch that as you do have long lines of, okay, are people turning around leaving? Are we too slow for them? So do we need to add another person? But at the same time, if I'm greeted and I feel already connected to the cafe, I'm going to wait in that line.
That's a cool point. I mean, if you're greeting your regular customer too by name, and the other people hear that, they're really going to try to be one of these people.
Exactly.
One of the small things to watch out for, and we run into this problem every 2 to 3 years we run into this problem at our store, is we end up with a huge amount of regulars who the staff is very close with, and a new customer comes in and feels unwelcome because they did not receive the same treatment. And it's just when you have staff that's been there a while and then customers who've been there for a while, so it's something to watch out for, and I see it, it's like cyclical. Every 2 years I'll start to see it in my store. And I'm not saying that you have to have a staff change then, but I mean, you definitely have to be looking, for when people are a little too close to make sure you're having those conversations with your new customers, that they feel like they are regular and they've been coming forever. When you have a long line, we only have one POS at all of our stores, which, design-wise, POS do not have small footprints, so, when you add a second one, it is a big deal, and I don't know that I would add one in every store. I think one store really could use it, but it can add, that's what can kill our line sometimes. It's not necessarily the drinks, but just ringing people up. So making sure you're talking to the people in line, like sometimes we have an extra person who can't really do anything because they need that POS at a certain point type. So it's having those conversations with all the customers who are in line, getting something started. Did you know what kind of muffin you were going to have? Did you want some coffee? So that by the time they get to the register, half their order's done and taken. So it helps the transactions go a little faster. And then again, you're not 8 people back wondering if they are ever going to get to you or even know if you exist. They've been acknowledged. You see them helping the person right in front of you perhaps. Small things like that go a really long way as well. And then other small things, if you see a customer standing in your store, talk to them. What are they waiting for? That happens all, tickets get lost sometimes as people are waiting for drinks. And if you just ignore the people who are kind of standing there, they look like maybe they're waiting for something you don't really know. I always ask, have you been helped? Are you waiting on something? Sometimes it just takes us a minute, so I'm just able to chat with them, find out how their day was, a great interaction that they may not have had otherwise. And then you're also able to find out if maybe you missed something, which just happens every once in a while. A ticket gets lost, little things like that. So to me, those are also really key areas, but especially look for being too close with regulars and that new customer feeling unwelcome.
In regards to staffing, you guys have, based on your experience, recommendations for reprimanding or ensuring the quality is being done? Like, how do you know when it's the right time to let somebody go? And how do you separate emotion from business bottom line, that kind of experience?
So my mom, we had one girl who was with us for too long, and my mom used to run our stores, and she hated. She's the sweetest woman ever. If you ever talk to her, I'm much more like my dad, but she's just very sweet and loving. And there was one employee who she had to go. And at the end of the day, she did a lot of things right, but at the end of the day, she had a temper, and it got the best of her every once in a while with employees or with customers even. She just didn't handle customer complaints right. A customer would come with a concern and she would turn on them, if you will. And she had to go. And so my mom and I are discussing it, and she's just like, but I just think about her son and how, and that she's the main breadwinner in their house. And I'm like, yes, but you're the main breadwinner of your house, and you have a family to feed as well, and she's interfering with that. You know what I mean? If she is hurting your sales, your business pays for your livelihood. livelihood. And I think that's a really important thing to remember. You know, we like to think we take care of our staff, and I would definitely say we have a good relationship with our staff. We try and involve them in things. We have lots of incentives. We do lots of different giveaways and competitions and prizes and things like that. We have big parties every year for Christmas, after Christmas and stuff. But at the end of the day, they have a job to do. We have stripe sheets, we have write-ups. Those all result in termination. So termination for us becomes a somewhat black and white issue, because it's a matter of, you know, a strike is for all the minor things, if you will. You know, you were anything more than 5 minutes late is a strike. Out of uniform, you know, small things like that. Those stay on your record for 2 weeks. You know, 3 strikes at a time results in a write-up. You know, 2 write-ups result in a suspension, that 3rd and you're fired kind of thing. And it's just, you have to keep it black and white for yourself, because it makes it really easy for you. The problem is people don't write things down, and all of a sudden you just remember the good stuff instead of looking at that whole list that got you to that day when you're like, I should fire them. But if you look at that whole list, you're like, no, I actually need to fire them. They have been warned, they have been given chances. Call it coaching, call it whatever you want. I know it's like the new fancy word for talking to your staff, but you know, people need to be held accountable at the end of the day. You have a business to run, and this goes back to the number one thing: be slow to hire, quick to fire. It's the best thing I've ever heard. Take your time in hiring. Have a long interview process. If you interview, in order to hire somebody, I would say we interview 30 to 50 people for every person we hire. Your interview, you know, you need to find people who fit with your culture. Our company is not easy to work for initially, because we have tons of training, we have tons of testing. Those 40 hours of training that I talked about, every day is training, and the next day you start with a test based on what you were trained on. You don't get a 90% or above on the test, you are done training and you are cut out. It's genius, because this job isn't for everyone, and some people pretend like they want to do all the work and they give all the right answers in the interview. Push comes to shove, this is too much, I don't really want to do it. They're not really going to fire me on my first day. I will. We're good, you can go now. You know, and by being, so I would say our turnover rate, we lose people in the first 30 days or after 2 years. You know what I mean? And realistically for me, you know, in our coffee houses, 3 years is a perfect amount of time for somebody to work with me. You know, we just, within the stores, don't necessarily have a program that pays people to stay for 5 or 10 years, and I'm okay with that. You know, where we are currently as a business, that works for us type thing. So to me, 3 years is kind of, I've invested in them. You know, that first year is essentially all training, and then the first 2, you know, the next 2 years, they kind of give back, and they're super useful. And ideally, you know, people, I also feel like they know when they need to leave. We've had a few conversations about, you know, their clothes aren't as clean. They didn't get underneath the back shelving. Like, you just see when their priorities start to slip a little bit. And if it starts with small stuff, you kind of give them that warning. You can give them a second one, and I can promise you it's probably not going to get any better. You're just going to see it kind of continue to go down there, and then it's going to affect the attitude. And if it's not with the customers, it'll be with the staff, and then just morale starts to go down a little bit more. So slow to hire is definitely the biggest thing, which is hard and that's where you need to make sure that you have a staff where if somebody quits, you do not need to hire the next day. Do never put yourself in that position, because they're like sharks in the water and they just smell blood and boils.
Kind of on that same note, I know you just said you've been in business for 20 years, but when you first started out, you didn't quite have that full staff and full problems.
Nope.
And when shark smell blood and water,
correct.
What do you do?
So a few things. One, my staff knows that I will work open to close happily 7 days a week if it comes down to it.
Which she did when we opened LAX.
Yeah, I mean, my staff knows, like, there's no messing around. There's no threatening me, like, oh, well, she has to keep me. My staff knows I will absolutely be there. My mother will come out of retirement. My father will, I mean, at any time, we will do what it takes to make the business run without sacrificing kind of what we think is very important. So that's a big part of it for sure. You know what I mean? I think they have to know your boundaries, and they have to know that those are your boundaries. I always say, once you fire somebody, you don't need to fire anybody for the next year or so, I think when people see somebody get fired, it's like, oh, she's serious now. We should probably knock it off. And that kind of puts everybody in check a little bit. So I don't fire on a regular basis at all. Most people do leave on good terms, I would say. And like I said, it's that 30-day window where, you know, my other staff is like, well, I could have told you that was going to happen kind of thing. Or, you know what I mean? Or they're with us for a while and it's time to part. It's rare that we have to fire somebody for disciplinary action like that. As far as, you know, how do you not get yourself in that position? Don't work everybody 40 hours. You know what I mean? If you like to do 40 hours, hire a few people who work those 25 hours a week so that you can bump them up. I don't hire people with crazy schedules. I don't hire people with second jobs. Just because I find that people with second jobs rarely work out. I'm lying to you. I have one person right now. And even she is starting, you know what I mean? It's like she was fantastic for the first 60 days and now she's showing up like 10 minutes late and it's just because she's tired. And it's like, all right then, and so this week she's only working 2 days. And she's gonna get that reality check that you need, you need to figure it out. You need to figure out what works for you. You're not fired, but you need to figure something out, you know, and figure out where you want to be and what you want to do because that can't happen kind of thing. And so I think when you have scheduling flexibility, we make a schedule every week. We do not have a permanent schedule. I was just making mine the other day. It's on, we just do lines, and I have Monday, Tuesday, you know what I mean? I write the names on the left, the days on the top, and we make a schedule every week. So employees essentially have to earn their hours every week. And I think that's a fairly large incentive as well. So if you see somebody starting to slip, I don't want, you know, you can kind of start to cushion it. Like my employees know if hours get cut, they are not doing awesome. It's very black and white. So that's another way to do it.
I'm curious, you mentioned don't put yourself in a position where you're going to people who are 40 hours. So you're talking obviously part-time, 20 to 30?
Yeah, and we have probably half full-time, half part-time.
So what do you want to hire somebody as a second job?
I find that there's not a lot of people who can necessarily handle 40 hours a week and work very efficiently. Like, you know, to come in and work 8 hours a day on your feet all day, it's a long shift. A lot of people can't work efficiently for 8 hours a day. You know, they're happy to be off at 6 hours.
So what, I mean, you're only working 20 hours a week, but you go to school or what are you doing?
I think it depends on who you're hiring. Our hiring pool, like I said, is at 18 to 25 mark. A lot of our staff live with parents. A lot of our staff live with parents. Yeah, so, you know what I mean, I'm not necessarily hiring, you know, they might be taking a class here or there. Some people go to school 2 days a week, you know what I mean, and so those are easy, those are fine to work with kind of thing. And that's, you have to know your community and your area and what people are looking for in that sense, for sure. And we do have, like I said, we have half full-timers for sure. And you just have to kind of know that. But I'm always shocked when I put people to 6-hour shifts instead of 8, everything gets better. 8-hour shifts are just long shifts, you know, and then you're on your feet all day, you have to work fast, and especially as our stores have gotten busier, those 6-hour shifts, I do more and more of them. And not because the staff's doing a bad job, it's just hard. You know, you're moving really fast for 8 hours, and you know, it's not easy for everybody to do. So just recognize that, and my staff a lot of times does a lot better in 6 hours, and they make good tips because they're happier, they're friendlier, things are just moving along faster, so it can become a definite win-win. Do you guys do a lot of part-time at Starbucks, did you?
Starbucks, yeah, Starbucks says almost all part-time. The average hours is about 22, 23.
And there's a good theory behind that.
Yeah.
In your experience, do you find it's easier to train like people that are experienced or newbies? Like people who are
Yeah.
I like newbies.
Yeah.
I personally like newbies just because a lot of times experience have bad habits. So I think you know, in the experienced ones, it's kind of a situation by situation in a lot of ways. But if I were to choose, I would prefer with them. You know, exactly the training group that Klatch has set up works great for me. For an experienced person, they want to jump to the end. They don't want to go through all the steps to get there. They feel like they should already be there. When a lot of times going through those steps, they've never gone through them. And so it helps so much.
Yeah, and I would say I've definitely laxed up on that the past couple years as everybody it seems has worked for Starbucks. I'm just serious. I mean, in our applicant pool, we had one hiring fair where 90% of the people had worked at Starbucks. Everybody brings it to you at first thinking that it's positive, and it's like, it's not going to help you here. But so I think a few things help for us. One, we have a super black and white training program. You know what I mean? There is no jumping. We had everybody for us. Does not matter your experience. You start at the exact same pace, exact same place. Some people can move through the program in 3 months. Some people it takes 8 months. You know what I mean? So there's no time that we're looking for. And there's no advancing it. So if you can come with tons of experience, but if you can't do it our way, you're still not going to pass and you're still not going to move up. And I think that's one thing that helps. The other thing is asking the right questions. Why did somebody work at Starbucks? If you worked at Starbucks because you love coffee and it worked with your schedule at the time, I don't have an issue with that. That's a perfectly fine reason. If you come in and say, well, I worked at Starbucks so I know everything and I can jump behind the bar, I'm probably not going to hire you. Just your attitude already is a little cocky. You know what I mean? I can already tell you're going to be a little more difficult to work with. So ask those right questions again. Why did they work there? What did they learn from it? What was their favorite part? What was their least favorite part? Something that is much more important to me, and Starbucks does a very good job training in certain aspects on customer service. At the end of the day, we are in the customer service business. Simple as that. You can sell tires, coffee, or anything else, but if people don't want to return to you because of that customer service interaction, you won't stay in business. So, you know, from that aspect, because everybody has now worked at Starbucks, it feels like, we hire a lot more people with experience than before. Just have a good training program in place. And I think especially, I always tell new business owners who are new to coffee, not to hire with experience because they just get ran over, is what I find. So I definitely, you know, nobody's going to run over you with my experience. Not to be cocky, but you're just, you know what I mean, you're not going to. So, you know, be confident in your skills. So, you know, if you're going to hire people with experience, are you hiring them because of their experience and you do want them to come in? Well, that's one thing. But if you're hiring them because you like their customer service and other things, then make sure they know you're top dog, you want things your way, and they can have their 10 years, and this might be your second month in the business, but you know what you want, and this is it, and hold them to that. I think that's the one thing where I really tell people to be careful about hiring with experience is if there is a new cafe who's also new to coffee. Those are the ones where I see really have some trouble sometimes. Thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.